American. Fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life. Look, I'm a Hulkamaniac. I'm a 38-year-old man who grew up watching wrestling in the Northeast. Of course I'm going to love Hulk Hogan. He was a larger-than-life character, one of the greatest to ever do it, if not the GOAT in my opinion. But of course, there is the whole question of matches and match quality. Did Hulk Hogan really have any memorable or great matches during the Hulkamania era? Now, in Japan, when he was Ichiban in the early 80s, yeah, he had tons of great bangers with Antonio Inoki, so on and so forth. But what about the 90s and beyond, when Hulk Hogan was at his peak? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite Hulk Hogan matches, and I feel like they're all matches that are excellent and worth watching for a myriad of reasons. So let's just jump straight into the list. Coming in at number 5, we're going to go back to WrestleMania 18. This will be the only match featuring Hollywood Hulk Hogan, who of course was envisioned at Bash at the Beach 96, but I'm going with Hollywood Hogan versus The Rock. Now, on paper, The Rock was one of the biggest characters in the WWE at this time frame. Hulk Hogan was coming in with the NWO with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and on paper you would figure, well, everyone's gonna root for The Rock and boo Hulk Hogan. I mean, Hogan's the heel, The Rock is the face. But something interesting happened this match, something that I don't think a lot of people, especially in the back and the writers and bookers and stuff for the WWE, I don't think they expected this. But during the match, Hulk Hogan somehow became the face. He was the one getting cheered and The Rock was getting booed. And match quality wise, this was probably one of Hogan's best matches in, well, a very, very long time. It was hard hitting. It was stiff. There was lots of cool spots as well, brawling inside the ring and outside the ring. The Rock was always a really good worker with a great microphone skill, but many people didn't think Hogan could necessarily keep up with the younger people that were leading the WWE at this time. But I mean, he did. There's a reason why Hulk Hogan had a resurgence in the WWE after this match, bringing back the red, white, and blue, because of the fact that he just kicked ass in this match. It was some great storytelling. Hogan didn't even pick up the win, but he didn't need to. He looked like the grizzled veteran who still had a good run in him, and I think this match definitely stands the test of time, if just for the crowd aspect of it. The crowd being so into the match and so behind Hogan definitely makes this match special, and that's why it's number 5 on my list. Coming in at number 4 is what arguably started Hulkamania. I, of course, am going back to WrestleMania 3 and Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Now, before the WrestleMania era, Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant mixed it up at many events, but there was kind of a reboot. Once with WrestleMania 1 sort of happened, the WWF kind of went in a different direction, kind of not really acknowledging the past so much, but only focusing on the present. So Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant seemed like some sort of crazy match that would never happen. They were best of friends. Of course, Bobby Heenan got into Andre the Giant's ear, and at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, we got Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Now, work rate wise, I mean, this wasn't really a great match or anything like that. Once again, this match was strictly about atmosphere. Andre was kind of nearing the end of his run. He couldn't really move all that well, but he was still a very impressive sized specimen to look at in the ring. And Hulk Hogan shaking his head and yelling at him and, you know, being upset that Andre ripped off his cross, which was like the big thing. I remember being a little kid and being like really upset that Andre ripped off the cross of Hulk Hogan. But it just led for an absolute spectacle. And of course, this slam heard around the world when Hogan body slammed Andre the Giant. Alluded to as the first time it ever happened, but I mean, obviously it happened a bunch of times before that, but at Andre's size at this time, it definitely made it very unique. And I feel like WrestleMania 3 is what really took Hulkamania into another stratosphere. It really put the WWF onto a whole nother level of wrestling and sports entertainment because of the fact that you had this larger than life battle that couldn't be replicated really in any other company. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant might not be the best work rate match of all time, but the atmosphere and just the sensation and feeling when Hogan slams him and drops the big leg on him for the 1, 2, 3 is something that everyone should watch, and that's why it's number 4 on my list. Thing that I alluded to with Hulk Hogan at the start of this video was his time in Japan. He put on some really good matches in the early 80s, but did you know he had a string of matches in the 90s that were some of his best matches ever, and that's why they're on this list. Coming in at number 3, we're going to talk about Hulk Hogan versus Stan Hensen at the 1990 WWF All Japan Pro Wrestling Summit. Now, this match was billed as a special dream match, and it was probably one of the best hard-hitting matches and stiffest matches that Hogan has ever been in. If you know anything about Stan Hensen, he's an absolute maniac, and he was one of the biggest gaijins in Japan, and that's really where most of his career took place. So having the baby face, you know, red and yellow Hulk Hogan come into a match in 1990 at the peak of Hulkamania and do one of the craziest, bloodiest brawls done on Japanese soil at that time didn't seem like something that would happen, but it did. They were beating the shit out of each other in the ring with stiff shots, stiff chops. Outside of the ring, they were throwing each other into tables, nailing each other with chairs. Both of them were an absolute bloody mess. It was unlike any Hulk Hogan match you had really seen in the WWF. I would say maybe like the Paul Orndorff cage match, maybe the Saturday Night Main Event match against Big Boss Man had that same sort of brutality to it, but this was on a whole nother level. If you're a fan of hardcore wrestling, this match really stands the test of time just because of how they beat the shit out of each other during this match, and I absolutely love it. That's why Stan Hensen versus Hulk Hogan is number 3 on my list. Sticking in Japan at number 2, we have Hulk Hogan versus Tenryu in December 12th of 1991. Now, All Japan Pro Wrestling, of course, like we just talked about, was one of the biggest companies in Japan, and Tenryu was a part of that. But Tenryu ended up leaving All Japan. He ended up getting involved in an upstart company called Super World of Sports, and in 1991, the WWF teamed up with the Super World of Sports to do a string of matches with their talent against Japanese talent in Japan, and it was very successful. But SWS just went under very quickly because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. But Tenryu versus Hogan, you want to talk about technical wrestling, you don't talk about Hulk Hogan. You're not talking about stuff like drop toe holds, chain wrestling, all of this sort of stuff, but here we go. We have Hulk Hogan doing chain wrestling. We have Hulk Hogan doing a freaking enziguri. Like, what? This is not in the Hulk Hogan repertoire, but he understood that the Western audience didn't appreciate that stuff really at that time like the Japanese audience demanded. So he would switch up his style when wrestling in Japan and do some absolutely incredible matches. This is kind of a short match. I wish it went a little bit longer. It goes for about 12 minutes, but it's just 12 minutes of action-packed stuff. Hogan taking power bombs, no-selling stuff, Tenryu no-selling stuff, kicking out of the leg drop, but going down to the axe bomber, which was Hulk Hogan's lariat that he would use as his finisher in Japan. This is just an absolute treat of a match. It's something that I recommend every pro wrestling fan watch just because of the sheer spectacle of Hulk Hogan doing chain wrestling, Hulk Hogan doing enzigiris, and it's somehow, some way looking natural. There's even some outside of the ring brawling in this match as well. As far as work rate is concerned, this is by far Hulk Hogan's best match in my opinion, and that's why Hulk Hogan versus Tenryu is number 2 on my list. And coming in at number 1, the Irresistible Force versus the Immovable Object. No, not Andre versus Hogan. This is kind of round 2 with this. Two faces, the two biggest faces in the WWF, facing off against each other at WrestleMania 6, a match that had no business going 20 minutes long because of the fact that these two guys were not known for their work rate, but somehow, some way, told one of the best stories in wrestling history of all time and made it just absolutely spectacular. I, of course, am talking about Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6. Now, like I said, on paper, these guys weren't really known for their work rate, and obviously, it was kind of contingent on who they were working with. Sure, Warrior had great matches with Randy Savage and Rick Rude, and Hogan had some great matches as well with some competition, but when you pace them away from that competition and put them together, you don't expect a great match of storytelling, but I mean, this was that match. Yes, the moves weren't all that crazy. Yes, they didn't do anything really outside the norm except for some interesting no-selling towards the end of the match. Yes, there is that weird moment where it looks like Hulk Hogan is getting a blowjob from the Ultimate Warrior, but the atmosphere, the storytelling in this match, good versus good, which had never really been done before, especially in the WWF. Title versus title, the World Heavyweight Championship and the Intercontinental Championship both up for grabs in this match. It's an absolutely timeless match. Ultimate Warrior looked great in it. Hulk Hogan looked great in it. There was no mistakes, there was no botches, and just that atmosphere and that storytelling, absolutely amazing. I remember being a little kid and going to the video store and renting this, because seeing that box art and seeing Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, I was like, I can't believe they did this. This is insane. Hulk Hogan has to win. And then he didn't. It was supposed to be the passing of the torch, but we all know how history worked with that. So those are my top 5 Hulk Hogan matches of all time. I'm sure your list is probably a little bit different than mine. So let me know in the comments section down below what matches you have and where you have them. And as always, thank you guys for checking out this video today here on The Stash. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.